Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. We are officially in the 11th year now. Last week was that first episode, second episode, I guess you could say, of the 11th year. It's a pretty exciting time to me. I love the number 11. It's like a master number too. I'm not going to get into that right now, but what I am excited about, because it is kind of a master number and it does involve births, ones, we are talking about postpartum stuff today. And I actually have an expert on today who she works with, especially with women who have gone through, moms who have gone through childbirth. So I think, well, moms also who probably haven't gone through childbirth, maybe you've adopted, but today we're actually going to talk about postpartum, what that does to a body, how it can change your mental health, how it can change your sex drive. And my guest today is Sydney Crowe, and she provides moms with the tools and support they need to unlock their full potential. So through coaching and impactful speeches and the Mompreneur Collective, which is a supportive community, mothers can implement simple and transformative steps that lead to a more balanced, purposeful, and fulfilling life. And that is what Sydney Crowe offers in her work. So I want to welcome you, Sydney. We actually met through a fluke incident that we were both on a networking call one day. And I don't know if you're part of that networking group, Sydney, but I go in there sometimes still. So I just happened to see me in there. So I thought, oh, maybe that was just that fluke one incident that we happened to meet and connect. And now you're on the show. So welcome to the Pleasure Zone.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, honestly, it was a fluke one-time thing. I am not a member of that networking group. I had actually had a guest on my podcast who invited me to check out that group. And that was the day that you happened to be there. And we connected and kind of did a networking call of our own. And you invited me to be on the show. And I'm really excited to share my expertise here and help moms, especially with mental wellness. It's such a huge passion of mine. And I think it's, there's such a growing need for it in today's world. We've seen staggering numbers over the last 5 years in mental wellness as a whole. And so I'm just very, very passionate about helping moms feel their best from the inside out.
So Sydney, what was it that brought you to be interested in this work with moms in particular?
Honestly, it was mostly my own personal journey. I got into the mental wellness and mindset coaching space after going through a very long journey of motherhood and challenges with my kids. I was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety probably into my daughter's 3rd year of life. I'd had 2 kids, kind of 2 years back to back. And I sugarcoated everything when it came to my first. I was so terrified that if I was honest about what I was actually going through and feeling and thinking, that somebody was probably going to take my kids away from me. And so for the first 3 years of her life, I sugarcoated everything. And then I finally got on some anti-anxiety medication. And it was supposed to be for like a 1-year period. Oh, you'll be on this, you'll start sleeping better, it'll be fine. And 7 years later, I was still on that medication.
Wow.
And it was such a journey. And I was like, there was so much shame and fear in my own thoughts and process of all of that, that I just became very passionate about sharing my journey. When I finally kind of came to the other side of that, I was like, nobody should have to go through what I went through.
So what are some of the things that when you're working with moms, are you finding are some of the top things that they're coming in with issues postpartum?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work with moms a little bit later because most moms really postpartum are still seeing their doctors quite frequently. And postpartum, I guess, as a whole, most doctors will say it's a 6 to 12 week period. There are new reports coming out that are saying, it's at least the first year of your child's life. And I think that it really goes into those like first formative years of raising a child. There's so much uncertainty and learning new things about your child and yourself that postpartum is really like, there's a sliding scale as to who's going to call what stage actually postpartum. So just for the sake of this podcast, let's call it the first 12 months of your child's life. And a lot of them are coming in with exhaustion. Their hormones are completely out of whack. They are trying to figure out this new thing, especially moms that are moms for the first time. They don't know feeding schedules and sleeping schedules and pooping schedules, and like, you start tracking things in a way that you didn't even know was humanly possible until you become a mom. And so it's a lot of just figuring that out and feeling like they've lost themselves or a part of themselves along the way. And so you hear this like, oh, bounce back, or I'm going to get back to my old self. And my personal opinion of that is it's obsolete. You're now a new person, right? You've embodied, there's like a new level of growth, a new level of life that you've unlocked. And so if you want to go back to who you were, that's really like this mental struggle that a lot of women face, because society puts this out like women can be, do, and have everything, right? You've got to have the career, or you're not contributing to your household. You've got to have the kids, or what are you doing with your life? You've got to have like all of these things. And at what point does something just kind of give? And a lot of women, I think, mentally struggle with that because of the pressure that society puts out there for us to have everything and do everything. And so a lot of them are trying to juggle that and figure that out and like understand what life actually is supposed to look like moving forward outside of all of the societal pressure.
I think it's even within the last, mostly within the last 80 years. So post World War II really changed a lot around motherhood, right? And then our view of what mothers are supposed to be, do, and offer. And then we had that kind of post-war thing that happened in the 50s, where they kind of went back to traditional family. But somewhere in the 80s, it became like the two-income earner house, and the pressure to be able to have a baby. I know that when my mom had me, I think she had, so we live in Canada, but Sydney and I live in Canada. Nowadays, depending on who you work for, you can get like 6 months to a year off. I can't remember what it actually is. I think it's not the same across all the provinces.
18. Yeah, you can actually get up
Is
to
it
18.
up to 18?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
Canada's an anomaly in that aspect.
yeah, and I think France is up to 2 years, and they give you doulas. Like you get all kinds of help.
Europe
that's like
mean,
covered.
yes.
Yeah. So I know when I had, I only have one child. So when I had my child, I was self-employed. So I had no time off. So the pressure of have a baby, and at the time, the person that was Ziva's biological father was not helpful. He was, an addict, actively being an addict. Alcoholic. He was not functional, not helpful. So I was trying to grow my business, and at the same time, I needed to bring in income. Luckily for me, I had mom who like let me stay under her roof while I had, try to raise this child. And I'm like, working gardening jobs, trying to do it all. I'm like, if the women in China can do this in the rice fields, I can do this here, carry the baby in a papoose and garden in like 40-degree weather. And no, I couldn't. I wasn't raised with that kind of stock, and I didn't have that training prior to having my child. I wasn't like working out there. Like I somehow I put this ridiculous pressure on myself, and it was all exactly the thought of, if the women in China can do this, I can do this. And I was like, well, I certainly wasn't raised from the age of 5 working in a rice field to carry heavy weight and do this. So no, I couldn't do it. And kudos to them for pulling it off. Absolutely. Not that they should have to, but
No,
they do.
I do.
And I think I was watching oh, you know what it was? I think it was like years ago. I watched Dr. Phil back in the day. And Dr. Phil was talking about like something to do with the pressures of birth and all of this stuff. And he had gone home one day when his wife was pregnant, and he had asked her, well, what did she do today? Because he noticed nothing had been done in the house. And she said something like, I grew a lung today. How about you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is this connotation around what women are capable of. And I think, for a lack of a better term, like this societal pressure that is somehow in our heads. Because when I actually broke it all down, and I've reflected on my own journey, I had a great support network. I was very fortunate, but I was still terrified to be honest with the people that were closest to me. I was still terrified to be honest with my husband, who was very supportive at the time. And it took me really having an episode where I had snapped. I was screaming at my daughter. I was scared. Like, she was upset. I was trying to nurse a baby and deal with a toddler, and it was exhausting. And I was running the back end of our business, and I was trying to do all of these things, and mentally having this idea that I was like, I got to get back to who I was. Like, I've lost something. And at the end of the day, it was just like so mentally overwhelming and overstimulating that I couldn't manage. And I think that as a society, we're really doing a disservice. And I've noticed this more in North America, and especially in the United States, where they don't have the same, maternal EI and things that we have in Canada. But you look at the way, like you mentioned, France, you look at the way that they're willing to give women 2 years off work with, nursing support for doulas and things like that, and to have that kind of like in-home care. And we don't have that level of support here. You go to the doctors for your 6-week checkup, and they're like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And it's a standardized checklist. And they're like, great, you're good. Go have sex. I was like, what just happened? Like, I'm supposed to just be back to myself? Like, oh, I don't mentally feel like that. And I think we need to give more support to women and offer more services, and stop having this connotation that we can bounce back. Like, I will like trash that term time and time again. There is no bouncing back from having a baby. You don't bounce anywhere.
No, you don't. And your uterus doesn't bounce that fast back either. So I think it's is it only 2 months now that they tell you can go back? I remember being told 3, and I was like, thank you, 3, give me 3 years. But here I am, like this sex and intimacy coach. At the time, I didn't actually have the pleasure zone or anything like that. But I'd always been interested in sex, and I'd been studying all things about human sexuality for a really long time, and health as a holistic health practitioner. Yeah. And in my feeling was, I don't care if the doctor says I can go back and have sex. Actually, I had midwives. They were fabulous, and they were like, they really didn't like the biological donor. I'm married to somebody else now, but they didn't like the biological donor for the child. And they were like, you don't actually have to ever go back to him. I'm like, oh, I know. Thank you. They were really funny. And so they were super supportive. And also, I only have 1 kid, but I have to say, and I've said it on the show before, so I had a natural birth. I didn't have any like painkillers or anything like that. My midwives were amazing, and one of them even tried to do hypnotherapy with me, like in the middle of the birthing process, but she hadn't done any hypnotherapy with me prior to that. So I wasn't used to her voice. Like, I had done hypnotherapy before, but I would have probably needed 1 or 2 sessions to get used to that. And I was 3.5 weeks early. So they just were trying anything and everything for me. And it was really, I would have to say it was, I mean, I'm so grateful for them and their support. I think everybody should have doulas, doctors, have your midwives, have the whole crew, have everybody that you need for you. So if you feel more happy with doctors, have your OBGYN. And if you feel happy with midwives, there's no right way to do it. And I think there's a lot of shame even in that, right? Like there's shame even in the process of giving birth. Well, you didn't do this and you had an epidural. And it's like, stop shaming people. And the shame, I think even that during the birth process, even the shame of like, how did you get pregnant? Oh, it was by accident, like all that stuff. There's shame around that. There's shame around getting pregnant and, oh, you can't get pregnant, so you need IVF or and so now you're having this bundle of shame and you're trying to have a baby in this whole, like, you're surrounded in shame. You're trying to create a baby who's now being born into shame, you're now being shamed by the way you're giving birth. And then you're going to be shamed by the way you raise them, and then shamed by all of your, any of your mental health stuff that's going on. It's such a bundle of shame that I think, if anything, whoever's listening tonight, if you're experiencing shame and you're experiencing anything that would make you feel like self-loathing or anything, Sydney and I can both support you through any of that kind of stuff. So connect with us for sure.
Yeah, and
I wanted to bring that up because, yeah, go ahead.
Just because, like, everybody, like motherhood, parenting, birth, delivery, how you got pregnant, like every woman has a different experience. Even when you have multiple kids, you have different experiences with each child. A lot of people, there's this phrase that, I just was talking to a lady on Saturday and she was like, somebody told me every pregnancy is the same. And I was like, no, that is a hard no. It is very different. I had very similar pregnancies, but my children are very, very different. And postpartum was very, very different in both cases. And so there is no guarantee on what you're going to get. And I think you just have to know in your body and like go inside and know what's right for you. And seek the support if you feel like it's necessary, because it is such a beautiful experience. And it's an amazing thing to be able to grow a human and have a baby and be a mom. Like if I could go back, I don't do a lot of regret, but if I could go back and just re-experience my daughter's first 5 years of life again, I would, because I wasn't there. I wasn't present. I was so in my head about it. And I was wrapped up in so much shame around it. And we were dealing with so many struggles with her health and my health. Like, I just didn't appreciate it for what it was. And I think that it is a very beautiful experience. So it's time to kick the shame to the side.
I love the idea of support and getting support systems in place. So we're going to head to our first commercial break. And when we come back, Sydney, if you could talk about some of your top favorite ways for people to get support, both with you and other systems as well that you're aware of that you utilize, that would be really great. Because I think the more information people have on where they can go and what they can do would be really great. So you guys are listening to The Pleasure Zone. I'm Milica and this is Sydney, and we are talking all about postpartum and the effects on mental health. And also we are going to get to a little bit of the sexy bits because it is The Pleasure Zone, and that postpartum affects that a lot. And we're going to talk about that when we come back from this commercial break.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. For those of you listening, you're probably somebody who's experienced postpartum, or you're the partner of somebody who's experiencing postpartum, and this show might actually contribute to them. You're going to probably find information in the next few segments about different resources that you can use, different ways that you can connect, either yourself if you're experiencing postpartum or your partner who might be experiencing postpartum, to connect with Sydney so that you can have, connect with her for coaching so that you can have more resources, you can have more information, and be able to move forward and have a much easier time postpartum rather than sitting and wallowing in it like some of us did for years. So I kind of joked before this show, I was talking to Ziva about, I was like, Ziva, I think like, even though you're 16, I still think there's like postpartum because you're not in my uterus anymore. And so then Ziva looks it up and Ziva's like, technically it's only 6 weeks, Mom, so no. And I'm like, okay, technically. But I'm like, what actually is? And you were saying like a year. They're saying medically it's a year, but really, I think that it can go on a lot longer.
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. I mean, some medical practitioners believe 6 weeks is the cutoff. It's like, that's it. There's no gray area. As time is progressing, we're seeing more and more resources that say maybe it's a 6 to 12 week window, but after 3 months, like you're good to go. And now more recently, we're seeing some resources say that, it's definitely the first year of life.
Yeah.
I think I personally experienced it much longer than that, but I had 2 kids relatively back to back. I'd gotten my first one to her first year, and then I was pregnant again, which sent my body into a whole nother tailspin of hormones. And then I was dealing with postpartum with her and raising a toddler. And so like my life for a while just felt completely chaotic. And my body is, I had been on birth control for a very long time, prior to getting pregnant the first time. So again, there was just this like lack of intuitiveness that I had with my body and myself, because I had gone from birth control into pregnancy, into birth control, into pregnancy, into birth control. And it was just this wild ride that I was putting my body on. And mentally, it created quite a bit of instability for me. My oldest was dealing with a ton of health issues that definitely compounded things. And so I don't know if there's really a definitive term where we can say like, oh, yay, they're 1 year old or 12 months old and you're good to go, or 6 weeks. Like, I think every person, and we were saying this before the last break, that every person, every mom has a little bit of a different journey to walk. And I don't think that putting a stigma like, oh no, you're past the 6 week mark or you're past the year mark and you can't experience any of these things. Like, I think that that's a very false statement. And I think it does the moms out there a disservice, because we think that's where that pressure comes in, that societal pressure where we're like, well, we're 6 weeks postpartum, or we're 12 weeks, or we're a year postpartum. Like, I should be back to normal. I should be feeling all of these things. Why am I still feeling, these hormone craziness and all of that? And it does everybody a disservice when we put that should stigma out there. So I think if you are 2 years postpartum or post delivery, and you are still experiencing things that maybe could feel like you're checking these boxes that could be postpartum depression or could be postpartum anxiety or just struggles that relate postnatal, then who are we to say that you don't qualify to be classified as postpartum?
Yeah. And whether you feel like you need to be having the label or not, I think it's just to acknowledge that your body might not recover in that 6-week period. Mentally, physically, emotionally, you might not be there. And depending on like the level of support too, like you were saying, even though you had support and you were sugarcoating things, it was like 5 years of sugarcoating. And I think I had support from my mom, and I didn't have a lot of other support at all. So that support was saving grace. Like without that, I would have been incredibly suicidal. I know that because I'd felt it already. And I also was adamant that there was no way I was going on meds, because I knew me, I would become addicted and I would probably never get off of them. So I knew from my own sanity, I was like, I have to find other resources. So I did a lot of other things, and that did help me. But I had to first admit to myself that I'm not okay. Because it was about 2 years until I actually admitted to myself that I wasn't okay. I wasn't admitting it to my midwives or my nurse practitioner. I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. Yeah, dealing with an idiot. I'm fine. I'm fine. Got a baby who doesn't sleep. I'm fine. You know,
And I
can't
think a
figure
lot
out
of
the
women do
schedules. I'm
that.
fine.
Yeah, and a lot of women do that. That is this like societal pressure that, you know, for whatever reason, we feel like it is not okay to not be okay post-delivery. Like we have just grown a human and birthed them into this world, and all of a sudden we're expected to just be fine all the time.
Yeah.
And it's such a disservice. We definitely need to be bringing these conversations to the forefront. And that's one of the reasons I became very passionate about sharing my story and my journey, because I honestly thought that if I verbally said what was going on in my head, that CPS was going to take my kids away. I was like, somebody is going to call them and I am going to be deemed unfit. The thoughts that I'm having are not okay. And it was a real struggle. You know, my daughter has now been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder, but it took 9 years before we actually got those answers. So we really were in the thick of it. I mean, I remember having to pump and tube feed her off my finger, which took my husband and me both to get up every 2 hours to feed her. And it was just like, it was a wild time. There was one night where like, cause she had stopped breathing a couple times in her first 5 days of life, where I was literally just watching her chest go up and down in the bassinet. And my husband woke up and he's like, have you gone to sleep? And I was like, no. And like probably looking like something out of like a crazed cartoon with like bloodshot eyes. And he's like, I'll watch her. You can go to sleep. And then he was able to go to sleep anyways. Like he knew she was going to be fine. But like in my mom's psychosis, I was just like, I just have to watch her chest go up and down, because if it stops going up and down, then I'm awake and I can help her, you know. And that was really what triggered my spiral, and it just kept going from there. And at that point, I was like, no, I got to just tell everybody I'm fine. Like, she's better now. We're good. Everything's good. We're okay. And it was not okay. Like inside my brain, I would like wake up at 2 a.m. and just be like, am I crazy? Like, am I okay? I don't know. Like, is she okay? Am I gonna survive this? And it took me probably another 18 months before I even told my husband. Like, he was like, you gotta go. Like, I'm here. We're gonna figure this out. You can go to the doctors and we will figure this out. And, you know, I'm grateful for that. It definitely wasn't the journey that I wanted. I was very much of the same mindset of you. Like, I don't want to be on medication. I have addiction struggles in my family. I didn't want to become dependent on things. And 7 years later, like I still couldn't sleep. And that's when I started to, once we got her diagnosis, I was like, I'm not going to use her as a pincushion. Like, we are not testing things on her. I took a very strong stance on medication and a whole bunch of other things. And it's funny how as a mom, I was willing to do more for her than I was for myself. And that's
how it is.
Yeah. And it's very common. Every single mom that I've worked with has said the exact same thing to me. And it's true. Like, it's like, we're going to jump in front of a bus to save them, you know, but we can't look internal and save ourselves at some point. We lose that filter when we become a mom sometimes. And it's a struggle because there's just only so many minutes in a day. You know, a lot of the women that I work with know all the right things to do. They know that they need to get outside and get fresh air. They know that sunlight can help them. They know that eating a well-balanced whole food diet is going to be healthy for them and work for them. Exercise is super important. But 95 to 99% of the women that I talk to, they're like, yeah, we know all of that. How do you fit that in? How does this work? And it's filling those gaps and figuring out ways to get the extra energy and get their nervous system regulated, because that's really what it comes down to, is their gut health is out of whack, their nervous system is out of whack, and they just need a reset so that they can start implementing these other tools to be healthier and be more well for themselves and for their kids.
So with some of the women, as you're talking about that, it's like, how, you know, how do they remember how to do all these things? So are some of the support groups, or even when people work with you, are there group scenarios where they get to have, you know, like a buddy system where it's like, hey, you know what, if you need somebody to, let's cook together and get all the meals for the week done together. So you can watch my baby, I can watch your baby, we'll cut food. And like, to me, I think I always wanted to live in a commune. So I bought like 45 acres of land so I can create my own commune, because I wanted to always be able to share tasks and chores and like all responsibilities. Like, let's do this together. So I don't, to me, that would be ideal. Like, let's have like a group cookout and like, let's all look after each other's babies while we make food. But that might not be happening.
I don't see it happening very often, but I agree with you. And you look at the cultures like in Eastern type cultures, like you've mentioned the Chinese culture and how they're all out in the rice fields, like they all live under one roof. You've got generations living under one roof. And North America has completely gone away from that. You used to live on streets where all the neighborhood got together and the mom stayed home and you could do potluck dinners. And like, there were all of these things that used to happen. And, you know, every year we seem to get further and more removed from that ideology, right? And I think that is definitely more of a North American issue, and why women, especially here, are feeling less and less supported generation after generation. We're just seeing more and more struggles. And then you compound what kind of happened over the last few years worldwide, and where we were all isolated and all alone. And, you know, it's just compounding the problems here.
It absolutely is. And isolating people who actually need to be around others to have the stories shared. I don't know. For me, I needed to go to like playgroup when I had it was probably about 2 or 3 months in, but I needed to be, even though I didn't know the women in playgroup, I just needed to be around other people experiencing what I was experiencing, so I didn't feel so freaking insane.
Yep.
And so playgroups for me were like my race.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to, like, we used to have one Friday mornings. I used to always go. It was a government run program. The kids could run around and play. They had a gated area for babies. It was amazing. And I think that they've re-implemented that. Like, my kids have gotten older now. But I used that all the way through. And then when COVID happened, that got taken away. So you're seeing a lot of new moms who didn't have that level of socialization and support. And I think it was extremely detrimental to them. Absolutely.
Each other. And like, if my baby couldn't get breast milk, like if I couldn't feed my baby, then there'd be the wet nurse. Maybe my buddy next door could, right? We don't have that. Like, you don't see that kind of help anymore, where, you know, that could be, you know, if you're going through any kind of anything stress wise, you might not produce milk. And if that's something you really want to do, is be able to give your baby breast milk, what a great thing if you did have community where you could find these resources of things you need that are, I don't know about you, but for me, the most stressful thing was just wondering, did my baby get enough food?
Yep.
Is, you know, and is the, like you were saying, you start measuring things you never even in your life, the things that you would be measuring. you're measuring like the ounces of milk for the first 3 months or whatever it was, and just making sure that there's enough intake and outtake, and how many diapers to how many bottles, and how much sleep, and how much sleep did you get. And at one point you're just like, I can't even count anymore a simple 1, 2, 3, because I'm only counting to 1.5 these days. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I felt a ton of shame around because of our first daughter and all of her health struggles in the beginning. My body was under an immense amount of stress and anxiety, and I did not produce enough. And they were like, oh, well, just supplement with formula. And I cried and I cried. And it was just because it wasn't what I wanted, because everything I had been taught up to that point was breast is best. And I think fed is best, right? We have to stop this stigma around breast is best. If that is great, if that is best for you and your child and that works in your family, fantastic. If your body is not producing enough milk, there isn't any shame around that. Like, it's just the way it is. I was taking so many herbs and supplements and drinking water and doing everything I could to get my milk flow to come in, and it just wasn't the case. Right. And then even with my second, I co-slept with her for a little bit. And the second I was able to get her in her crib, my boobs were like, we're done. You don't have a baby anymore. And I was like, what? She's just down the hall. Like, I still want to feed her. So I think every woman, every child, every pregnancy, every baby, like it's just different. It doesn't matter. Right. I think it's just, if your baby is healthy and happy and you are providing a loving environment, like that's the focus. That's what we need to really impose on moms, and just say, this is what's best, right? It's not, there's no standards and stigmas around other things.
It's very rare that you hear, like, once a baby's born, it's very rare that you'll hear anybody ask you anymore how you're doing. That was something that I noticed. It was always like, how's the baby? Oh my God, is the baby sleeping? I haven't slept in 5 weeks. I don't know. So,
I know, it's so
I don't even
true.
know my name.
Yep. And it's so true. I mean, I remember even like meeting my extended family for dinner, and it was like, oh, the babies. And I'm like, hi, I'm here too. Yes, I still exist. I am alive.
That's right.
I don't know what it is about babies, but all of a sudden we're just invisible.
Yeah. And I have to say, I want to put this one out to the world, because I always found it obnoxious and annoying when people would come visit the baby, wake the baby up, play with the baby, and then also expect to be entertained. And I was like, if you really want to do me a favor, go cook for me. Can you go wash the diapers? Because I did a lot of cloth diapers because I just didn't have money. And so I'm like, it wasn't that I was trying to be a hero. It was like a financial thing. And I'm like, if you really want to help me, can you do this or this? You don't have to, I can hold the baby and nurse the baby. You can't. But if you can do everything else I need to do, thank you. Could you also wash my feet while you're at it? Because I haven't had a bath in 3 days. Like, something would be great.
Just even, yes, 100%. I was talking to somebody about baby gifts. They were asking me, they're like, oh, so-and-so's having a baby. What do I get people who are having babies? I was like, meals. Buy them gift cards for like food to go, their favorite restaurant, bring over a bunch of Costco dishes and put it in their freezer for them. Like, that is what you buy.
Offer to do the laundry for them, clean their house for them. Those are the best gifts. 100%. I agree. Don't need a million toys right now. Thanks so much.
Or how many onesies can you possibly obtain?
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody's coming over to help you do the laundry, then you only really need maybe 5, right? And the baby's going to grow so fast, 5 in each phase of life. We're good. And that's, their whole life is a onesie. They don't need to have fancy clothes. I can't tell you how many funny, frilly, fancy things. Like, it's like, okay, where am I going to take this baby who never sleeps to talk to all of you all the time where I want to sleep? Yeah.
And also, I feel like I belong under a rock right now, because I like, your boots are full, everything hurts. Like, you don't want to go out. So where are these fancy outfits going?
Yeah, they're going nowhere. And oh my God, the hurting boobs. And I do not miss at all having a giant wet stain on my shirt
No.
every time that I would hear like even a whinge, like, and it's like, I'm like, what? So I nursed for 4 years, right? In the last 2 years, my boobs were more controlled, but the first 2 years they were out of control, and they would just flow, flow, and flow. And then I would be worried. I'm like, oh no, the milk's coming out. And what if that's the only milk for my baby for the, and like that crazy thought would happen.
Yeah.
You're like,
Or
oh
if
no,
you've ever
hold
pumped,
off.
yeah, if you the
Oh,
phrase
and
"nobody cries
yes,
over spilled milk" has not pumped their boobs for
so
it.
real.
Yes.
That, and it's so real. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are so many stresses. So I think what I'd like to talk about too, so we talked a little bit about possibilities of ways to get support, whether it's family, friends, bring over those meals instead of the toys and go to those play groups, connect with people and be real with them. And I know it's going to be hard, guys, but talk to people who have gone through childbirth. They're not going to think you're crazy because they've gone through it. And if you're like, you know what, there was a day where I didn't sleep for 5 days and I just wanted to jump off of a bridge, I'll be like, yeah, fuck, I get it. I hear what you're saying. I've been there, done that.
Also, I think moms need to stop sugarcoating it, because I feel like I had asked a few questions and they're like, it's the most beautiful experience in the world. And I like got to it and I was like, who are these people telling me that this is like the best? Because like my tits hurt and I feel like I'm swollen beyond belief and my kid is crying and I'm having to set an alarm to wake up every 2 hours to feed her. And there's just so much stress and so much anxiety. Like, I love her, but is this how the rest of my life is going to be? Like, let's just be real about it.
Yeah, I think being real, and yeah, absolutely be real about it. So I think I was about to tell like a really strange and sick story, but and I'm throwing all of my commercials out of whack, and that's okay. It's for me to throw out of whack. But when I had Zeev like blew out of me, like literally. I was in labor really fast, and then Zeev was only 6 pounds 7 ounces, so 3 weeks early, like 3.5 weeks early, and I did 5 pushes, and it was like a cannonball shot out of me.
Oh my gosh.
And but not only that, and it happened really fast. I went from like 3 centimeters dilated to 10 centimeters dilated in half an hour.
Oh.
My body was like, and my midwives didn't quite believe it. I was like, honestly, check me. I know that's like not a standard to keep checking, but something changed in me and this is happening like now. And they were like, what? Yeah, they were like shocked. They're like, what? It usually is like a centimeter per hour. I'm like, I'm telling you, this baby's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it was only half an hour. Something changed. And so, yeah, like a cannonball. And I ripped. Like, I can't even tell you how many layers and how many directions I ripped in. So when people are like, your perineum rips, oh, your perineum rips, your labia rips. I don't know, mine did. Stuff rips, and it's not fun. And there are like stitches. And so for a while, all I could think is, my vulva is Frankenstein. And there was like no way I wanted anybody looking at my Frankenstein vulva, touching it, going near it, having sex with the Frankenstein vulva. It was not going to happen. And so it took a long time to recover from that and be able to look back and go, oh, okay. There's no more stitches and violent looking angry vulva, like, and the swelling and then the stitching and then it's horrifying.
It is. And I mean, coming from someone on the other end of the spectrum who didn't tear, but everything stretched and everything was swollen and it's unrecognizable. Like what you go in with pre-birth and what you come out with post-birth is never the same. It is never the same.
And neither are your nipples. Your nipples are never the same.
Never.
Ever.
Ever.
They're not recognizable.
No. So, I mean, again, it's one of those things that I wish people had kind of prepared me for. I might have enjoyed myself a little more. I don't know. Prior to birth, who knows?
There is that. So yeah, maybe we could talk a little bit about that. We'll head to our next commercial break because now we're headed into where our last commercial break should be. And when we come back, let's talk about what some things are for women to be able to know am I actually ready to have sex again? Or am I doing this out of obligation? I did a show last week on obligation sex, which apparently is one of my best hits. But let's talk about a little bit about how do you know you're ready to actually get back on track? So we're going to head to our last commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about postpartum, what it does to you, the things that it can do to you in your mental health, the things it can do in your body. We're not talking too technical. We're just having a real conversation, which is a conversation I would have appreciated hearing too. So while I was going through stuff, I wouldn't have felt so alone maybe, or that it would be okay to talk about it. And so if anybody's listening out there and you need somebody to talk to, you would like advice, or you would like to connect, you can connect with me, or you can connect with Sydney. So to connect with me, you can find me through milicajelenic.com. That's MILICAJELENIC.com. My name.com. And you can book a you can book a 30-minute free, I added time for you guys, connection call with me on there for free. And Sydney, how can people get a hold of you if they would like to connect with you for all the services you offer?
Yeah, so I offer a free 15-minute connection call. My website is also my name. So it's sydneycrowe.com. That's SYDNEYCROWE.com. And I'm also on Instagram at SydneyCrowe17.
Awesome. So you're not alone, guys. I just want to let you know that if you are the partner of somebody going through postpartum, it's something to keep note of. Sometimes they don't want to hear you say, I think you're going through postpartum. There are ways you can bring up that conversation, and also, you know, introduce them to this show so that they can listen and maybe hear some things where they can decide for themselves whether they want to have a conversation, whether they need to seek help, whether it's they need to go to a therapist, a doctor, or they just need to talk to somebody, they need a group, maybe they need one of us. So let your partner know that you care. I think that's really important, because oftentimes that is so missed, and that they care enough to see that you're suffering. And so if you are going through this, whatever stage and whatever time this is, whether it's been 3 months, 3 days, or 5 years, it doesn't matter how long it's been. If you're experiencing postpartum, postnatal anything, and you would like some help, we'd be happy to assist you. So before we went to break, I had mentioned that at some point in a relationship, there's like an expectation that you're going to get back on that saddle and ride that horse. So how do we know when we're ready to get back on that saddle and ride that horse?
Honestly, I think that might have been one of the more terrifying things I've probably gone through in my adult life, is like trying to figure out when I was ready for that. Because like I said earlier in the show, I mean, you go to the doctor in Canada at your 6-week checkup, and if you check all the boxes, they go, you're good to go. Like, get back out there. And I was like, no, not a chance. So for me, it was probably closer to the 12 to 14 week mark, personally. And even that, like you mentioned your last show was about obligatory sex. And I felt like it was almost like I had an obligation to myself to do it. Like it was just like, I just got to get back on this horse. Like it's just, for a lack of a better term, that's, where it was. And I had to kind of force myself to just say, yes, I'm ready, because my body was okay, but mentally I was not there. And I think that that's probably one of the bigger struggles, is like your body feels okay, but mentally you're exhausted. Motherhood is freaking hard, people. Like it is just hard. You are up every 2 hours. You are feeding a human. You've just grown a human inside your body. Everything is different. It feels completely upside down for a while. And, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to say, like, yes, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm an adult and I can do hard things.
And I have to say, I want to add, like, things feel different. Sex feels different too.
Oh, yeah.
Just FYI. Sex feels different. So if you're expecting to go back to the sex you had prior to having a baby, sex feels different. It just does. And you might feel very differently about your body. And you might also go into panic in the middle of sex because you're like, I just had a baby. Do I really want to do this again? So you might have a whole gamut of emotions going through you and running through you and freaking you out at the same time. So yes, there is that thing of, you might think you need to get back on the saddle. And if you really do, then just get yourself into like the mental health check of like, am I okay right now? Am I allowed to say no? Can I walk away? Is this okay? Is your partner okay with all of that too? That if in the middle of it, you're like, you know what? I can't do this right now. I thought I could, but I can't. And being able to say no is so, so important. And that, I think also having the curiosity to try something new. So maybe it isn't going to be vaginal penetration sex. Maybe we start with something more fun. I mean, when you're nursing and somebody tries to stimulate you, and then all of a sudden the milk's pouring, like it gets awkward, guys. So it's different. And you might not like that. And I was not okay with having sex. And I think it was about 4 years. I was just like, no, especially with the biological donor. I would have rather have him go hide in a hole and never show up again. And it was like, wow, you contributed only sperm in this lifetime. I really don't want you to touch me.
Yeah. And
So,
I mean, that is not an uncommon feeling, even when you're not in a situation where you want, like, if you want your partner in the life and in the baby's life and things like that, right? Like, there was a very long period, and I still sometimes will go through cycles, like based on my hormones and whatever my body is going through, where I'm like, no, don't touch me. We're okay.
yeah.
And having an understanding partner is a really key piece of that, for sure. I felt very safe, so it was okay for me. But yeah, I definitely,
Which is amazing. Yeah. So, and if your partner is still needing some kind of connection, then it's to check in with you on what it is you, the person who's given birth, what you can offer them. And that might just be a cuddle. It might be a kiss. It might be a hand job. It might be a blow job. And it might be nothing. It might be just being able to look at them. And that is your first step. Like, wow, I haven't really looked you in the eyes in like a year. Let's start there. Let's see what we can do right there on a very simple level. Let's hold hands and see what that feels like. And if you can't look at each other or hold hands, you probably shouldn't be slapping your body parts together, kids. Like, let's just really keep it simple.
yeah. And I think that that's like an important piece to mention, like motherhood as a journey. Like, it's not just that postpartum cycle. Like, there are many things that have come up. My kids are now 9 and 11. And there's many things that have come up in many seasons where, we've had dry spells and things like that, because it's just, we are not in a place where that is a priority. It's just like, how can we stay connected? And that is such an important piece of it.
So guys, I know that you guys always love good, sexy talk, but sometimes postpartum, it doesn't get all that sexy. It's just remembering that if you care about your partner, that you want to stay connected. And we got about 15 seconds left. So I just want to let you remind everybody, Sydney, how everybody can get a hold of you again once more, so that they can never hear it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.sydneycrowe.com.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic.
Thank you for having me.
The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.